Here are the 7 best digital SAT practices to make sure you are well prepared for your first ever digital SAT. First things first, do not forget what you've learned about the paper SAT because the same tricks and techniques apply. So whether this is your first SAT or you're taking SATs from prior, you want to make sure that you're still studying the same tricks and techniques that are taught for the paper SAT because they will be used on the digital SAT. Don't think just because this new SAT is digital, old stuff doesn't work anymore. No, it's actually the exact same content, just different wording. That's all the DSAT is. And on that note, you want to start taking practice exams on computers. The paper SAT, what you're probably used to is printing out a PDF. Maybe your school will give you a booklet with all the practice SATs and you will go through them. The transition from doing work on paper versus on a computer is totally different. Now, you are given scratch paper on the digital SAT. So it's not like you won't be able to, write down formulas or do some math on paper because that's probably what you're used to. You can still do that. But just answering questions on a computer versus like bubbling in a Scantron is a little different. And for some people, you'll be surprised how much of a difference it can make. In fact, it might affect your speed, sometimes even your accuracy, as well as how you approach the exam. Because some students, what they did with the Scantron was they would just circle the questions in the booklet, and at the end, they'll bubble in everything. You can't do that with the DSAT. You got to answer as you go. So you got to make sure that you are prepared for this type of format because the worst thing that can happen is you're not prepared to answer questions on a computer and you start getting nervous and overwhelmed and you just fail because you can't fail. The digital SAT also lets you use your own calculator that is approved by the test center, but it also gives you a calculator within their Blue Book application itself. So one of the best things you want to do, one of the best practices you can do is decide early on in your entire study routine whether you want to use your own calculator or you want to use the calculator provided by the digital SAT. If you decide to use a calculator that is provided, then you want to get used to it. You want to start learning how to do certain commands. You want to get pretty proficient with and be able to do things quickly because you don't want to be slow and try to figure out how to use a calculator on test day. Now, personally, what I recommend is I do recommend bringing your own calculator only if it is TI-84 or better. The reason behind this is because the TI-84 is the best graphing calculator that I think exists. And with the TI-84, you can do exactly what you want and then some for the SAT. Like it's overkill if anything. You can use it for calc, you can use it for college math. So things on the SAT are like piece of cake for a TI-84. By the way, comment down below which calculator you prefer because I'm kind of curious which calculators you guys use. I know some of you guys have those high-tech calculators, probably have some AI in there now. The next best practice for your upcoming DSAT is to focus on math primarily. Now, you've probably seen this video, I've mentioned math a lot. The reason is because just like the paper SAT, studying for math is easier. Your math score is probably going to be higher than your reading score on both paper SAT and digital SAT. And this is where I talk about the 2 approaches that you can have when taking the DSAT. If you're planning on taking the DSAT twice, what you can do is you can prioritize one section for the first time you take it and prioritize the second section for the next time you take it. And then you can super score to get an overall good score. The other approach is to just try to do your best on the exam, both sections, both times you take it, and then super score. Personally, I recommend the second approach. When you're taking the DSAT, you should be trying to get the highest score possible for each section. Don't just study one section and totally neglect the other. You should be studying 2 to 3 hours a day for both sections. So you might want to alternate on Mondays, Tuesdays, depending on what day you want to be your math day, what day you want to be your reading day. The next thing you gotta do is simulate the real test environment. So no longer do I want you to print PDFs from College Board for the DSAT and fill them out. You want to replicate your exact testing environment that you're gonna be facing when it comes to test day. So how do you do this? The practice tests offered on many websites like College Board, for example, for the DSAT are PDFs. So the module 2 isn't adaptive. And for those who do not know what I mean by this, check out this video right here where I talk about the digital SAT and everything you need to know about it because the module 2 is a big key part of this new SAT format and it's what's gonna cause a lot of problems for students if they're not ready. So this is why I like to use the platform LearnQ.ai, which actually gives free digital SAT practice tests and that are adaptive, meaning the module 2 will reflect how you do a module 1. So if you do really good at module 1, your module 2 questions will be dynamically changed to be much harder. And this might sound a little bit scary, but this is how the real DSAT is. So you want to use a platform like LearnQ.ai that actually shows shows you a real test that you might be experiencing on test day. By the way, it also gives you your projected score, so I like to see that a lot as well, because that way I can see if I'm on track to getting that 1600. And some of you guys might be wondering, is Khan Academy still viable? Yes, Khan Academy is still viable, but they are lacking a lot of features, especially in like 2024. Like there's no projected score, there's not much with analytics regarding your scores, so I do prefer these more advanced platforms. The next practice is simply just don't be afraid to seek help. Guys, you have teachers, you have friends, you have free YouTube videos that you can use to study up for the DSAT. All right, you have absolutely no excuse to not get the score you want because there's so many free resources out there. One of the things I used to do a lot for exams, and you guys can probably do for DSAT, is if you have a friend that's taking the exam, you can just ask them exactly what was on the exam. Obviously, it's gonna be a little different for you, but that way you can get a gist of what you could possibly face on exam day. It kind of gives you like a sneak peek, so you have an advantage over students who are going into the exam blind. And if you are watching this YouTube video right now, you are already on the right track to seeking help and making sure you are well prepared for the DSAT. And if you want to take a step further, you can also receive tutoring from me. I have a link in the description below for the details. And the last practice is to do Module 2 hard questions and spam them. What this means is that these Module 2 questions, like I said, are pretty hard for reading and math, but you want to spam them. You want to keep doing these Module 2 questions so you can see every single type of question you can face. Now, some of these questions might be really hard for you when you first start studying, but as you more exposed to them and you constantly, see like how to do the problem, the answer key for it, how the tricks and techniques that apply to it, it will start making a lot more sense. And by just doing these problems every day, you're gonna get used to it, and eventually you're gonna be able to crack them, and you're gonna be a boss, and you're gonna get the exact score you want. So if you want to prepare to get a really high score for the digital SAT, be sure to follow these practices because they are going to make a huge difference in your score. I have a bunch of resources linked in the description below, so be sure to check them out as they are gonna boost your score for the DSAT much faster. Thank you all for watching.